Hiya.
So good afternoon, John Rushford. How are you?
Hiya. How you doing?
Good. How's everybody over in Nairn?
We're doing well, actually. Now we've been able to open up again. It's made such a difference. But trying to get people on Zoom now is a waste of bloody time because they just say, "I ain't going on there. I can join people in the shed." So yeah. Hey ho, it is what it is, isn't it? Oh,
Yeah, firstly, I think, John, there's a reaction to the oppression of lockdown. And,
yeah.
there's a natural tendency to go back to where we came from.
Yes.
For me personally, I don't think it's an either or situation. I think that this will be part of our future. Even the fact that you
Yeah.
and I can communicate and chat, it's a wonderful thing.
Oh,
Um,
I totally agree with you. It belongs where we are now, isn't it?
mm,
As you say, I don't worry about it. If somebody says you want to meet on Zoom, well, you get on with it, don't you?
yeah.
And it's fine by me. Uh,
Well, it's interesting. Just earlier on, John, I took part in. Um, we got some funding from a group called the Community Foundation in Ireland to
mhm.
run some support issues for older men around isolation and active citizenship. There's about 35 national organisations, like big operations like Age Action and etc. And what I noticed that everybody naturally knew when to turn off their mic. I mean, something has been gained in the
Yeah.
learning. People that. So welcome, guys, so far for coming along. Um, just the first thing is this is being recorded, um, as I say, for quality and training purposes, but really actually for training purposes. But just to say that numbers of people have contacted me in different ways for many reasons, not being able to come here through time zones, work commitments, grandparental duties, of which I see Jim Heffernan is coming in, having completed his. Graham Hill just sent his apologies in. He's on, it must be midterm break or something in England, so there's duties on. How are you, Tony Ledington? Um, Stefan from West Armagh, in Northern Ireland, we just befriended yesterday, I think, on Facebook. So welcome, and Graham, and Nathan Soria, your video's turned up. So what this I've set aside 90 minutes here. People may join us at different times. Uh, Enda Egan from the Irish Men's Association, Shed Association, the CEO, he only saw my email. Hiya, Nathan. Just saw my email
Oh yeah.
last night, and he just told me he has some personal bereavement that has happened in the last couple of days. He's also at another event. So he's going to try and join us. He did say he would send along one of the employees of the Irish Men's Association. So, look, that's great. The reason for recording this is really to create a rolling trail going forward for anybody who might want to develop this discussion on any forum in any way. That if there's any learning to be gained out of this, great. I have no idea who might turn up. I have reached out to people from all aspects of my experience of my life. So I have a proposition here, which is I run with this idea of the four P's: the paradigm, the problem, the proposition or the proposal, and the plan. So that's a methodology which I use to sort of straighten out my own head. So what I wanted initially to do is just give some background into why I call this initiative, what I see is the need, where I see the possibilities are, and maybe frame a discussion around that. The meeting I was at this morning was extremely organised. It had a purpose, it had a whole agenda, etc. This, by definition, can't be that. But I would say to anybody looking at this in the future, so this will be out on YouTube in the future, if this conversation serves any interest that you have, then, I would just say, take it, digest it, um, ingest it, digest it, regurgitate it, as Anthony de Mello would say, and give it forward to somebody else. So what actually stimulated me to call this meeting this week is a post that was in the UK Men's Sheds. And it was some guy, can't remember exactly who it was, and he was saying he was stepping down from the role of chairman after 3 or 4 years, and nobody else wanted to take it up. And he was saying, "What do you do now?" And I just thought it was really interesting, the feedback to give back. Like, people were saying, "Well, Why don't you just elect the chairman for each meeting? Just go from meeting to meeting. Somebody else suggests having a couple of chairs. Other people suggest you don't need a chair. There was all sorts of things there. So I know that I've been mulling around in the last number of years around the whole concept of leadership, not necessarily within Mensa, just the whole idea of leadership. And certainly looking at our own shed, and some of you would have joined us on tea and chat sessions in Zoom. John was the first one here, and a year ago we were chatting through lockdown and necessity, and as John says, the boys aren't interested anymore. But you know, we had a transition of succession management in our local shed in Donegal, from myself, who will be 66 tomorrow, to and therefore young, perhaps, in terms of many of the men, older men in sheds, but also there are many younger men out there. So 2 of the 3 people who took up our group were 50 years of age this year, 50. And speaking recently to a man in Limerick in Ireland, he said he's the youngest man in the shed at 62, and the next youngest is 78. And he bemoaned the fact that there were no younger men around. So my sense is that to have a conversation here today around leadership in general, as broad-based, what is leadership? Is leadership necessary? Are leaders born or made? Can you develop leadership skills? Are there prerequisites to be a leader? What type of leaderships? Are you a servant leader? Are you a command and control type of leader? Why would an organization need it, etc.? So that we can have that broad-based conversation. But the basic idea I had was, when you're a baby, you need a lot of help. You know, you're dependent on others. As you get into the latter stages of your life, you also need a lot of help. And there's sort of a couple of phases on the way there. There's the post-retirement phase, which, although I'm retired voluntarily for the last 11 years, I mean, I would be typically only 3 months into at the moment. But there's an age, it seems to me, and I put this out for consideration, somewhere between, say, 45 and late 50s, whereby typically as a man, if you have children, most of them will be either in their teens or early 20s or moving on. You may still have dependent parents, and you still have energy. You know, you have actual energy, and your probably foot is in the workspace or something to be doing things. And, you know, I look around at the men I've met in the sheds, and I just feel that there's an awful demand made on much older men to try and hold sheds together. I think it would be wonderful if the talent and energy of men in that region of 45 to 60, 45, late 50s, could be harnessed, mentored, developed, trained, supported, by what I call a placenta group of wiser and older men, who might then create a situation where over a period of 4 or 5 years, a number of men with energy could have developed almost a sort of a collection like the Knights at the Round Table or something. You know, a group of people amongst themselves who had learned value, who had shared learning experiences with each other and created a great phalanx of interpersonal support. And that's not just within Ireland or Donegal or worldwide. So like this thing has, for me, the conversation has no borders, whatever it might be. And I just thought for me that that's the best contribution that I can make. How can I help someone else learn the good things that I know, learn to avoid the bad things that I really fucked up on, and as the fella says, the wisdom to know the difference. So the idea I had, and certainly based on Ireland, certainly for me, if I can find 5 or 6 men in that region of age, and I'll extend that by saying women as well. I'd like the conversation, not just because I meant it. I have a broader idea that in our society needs people in that age group to develop leadership skills. A lot of young people grow up and have come, I would say a lot of men of 40 years of age never had a chance to be of service. They were never in, you know, clubs and groups and things like that, where they learned watch older men and women be good guides and mentors. So that's the essence of my interest. People like Jim Heffernan who've joined me here today. Jim, you would have met John and Tony in our tea and chat sessions. Jim and I are engineers, retired engineers. Sorry, Jim. I'm retired. I need to return to learning about engineering that I never understood. But we go back a long way, Jim and I. When we were in university back in 1977, finishing off, we both did a final year project with a genius who was never caught out. And both he and I then produced a deep research into gun microwave diodes, with me not even knowing what a gun was. Like, it's not a thing you shoot people with. But we've bluffed our ways through society and our careers, etc. But I deeply valued the fact that Jim has, I think, really valuable insights to leadership that are quite contradictory to my own often and different. But that balance and reflective, critical challenge is fantastic. And I have invited lots of other people from my sphere of influence, including a number of what I would call really talented, influential women who I think would be willing to support this sort of process. The vision that I have in mind personally is a position where those people leading the process are helping to mentor this new. We wouldn't be in it for money. There's no money in this for anybody. I'm not really. No, sorry, I'm not. The group may decide otherwise, but for me, I would like to think that the wisdom passed on would be passed on freely. There may be an element of reimbursement for costs. That's a different thing. Just in speaking to Enda Egan, or he wrote to me last. Enda Egan is the chairman of the Irish, the CEO of the Irish Men's Sheds. He had been reflecting over going to the National University of Ireland Maynooth or the National University of Ireland Galway, and maybe getting a programme developed there, or it developed through the National Qualifications Framework in Ireland at a local county level through the Education Training Board. So there has been some sort of parallel consistency. I have an idea of having a completely non-linear organic process outside of the accreditation process. So there's lots of possibilities there. So that's just the background. I would like maybe to start the conversation around the idea of the paradigm we live in now. Maybe just talk for a few minutes. What is the context? I mean, when John and I just got in here initially, the last meeting we've had was online, our tea and chats, and as John said, it's very hard to get people to be interested in, say, Zoom at the moment, because we want to meet people again. So what is the paradigm for men's sheds that exists now, and particularly post-COVID? 2020, we would have never met, most of us. Anyway, didn't know each other. Now we have met, and we're back in our sheds, and the world has changed. So maybe can I just leave it open? So the two things I want to make sure today is that everybody who participates is on video, because there's no limitation as to who might come in here. Just letting a couple of others, and therefore just to preserve the authenticity of what we're trying to do. And so if anybody doesn't come on video, I'm just going to exclude them from the meeting. And the other thing is that when you're not talking, have your mic off. Simple as that. Just mute your mic when you're not talking. To simplify the exercise, just put your hand up like that. And I think hiya Dan, and thanks for coming. So just, it allowed the conversation. I'd like it to flow as freely as possible. I'm going to look for this idea of the paradigm, just to try and, what's the world we're all living in right now that we see and we see coming, and what is the problem or issue that we're looking at addressing. Now, I've posed this thing as a proposition of developing a leadership skill set which could serve leaders of men's sheds going forward. So can I just open it to the floor there, and maybe, again, if you want to introduce yourself, whatever, where you're from. What I've done is in the renaming section, it would always help if you put it, like John is there, John Rushford, Nairnshed, Stefan is there from West Armagh, and I'm there in Skibbo, Navarre, and Guido. But it might help particularly other viewers. So, throwing it out there, guys, the paradigm.
Liam, I don't even know what paradigm is. I didn't go to school.
Okay, so yeah, excellent. Just Stefan.
Just show me ignorance. I haven't a clue what it is.
No, John. Sorry. To be fair, I mean, I remember I was lecturing in control and automation in the Institute of Technology in Dundalk a number of years ago, and I was talking to students. I'd just come out of a whiskey making factory, and there was a problem with a palletizer, and they were working on pallets. And a fella said to me, "What's a pallet?" And I said, "Fuck, I need to stop here." So I got a video out and I showed him, this is what I was doing yesterday. So, okay, so what I mean by that, Stefan, and I use the word very clearly, is like a paradigm is the environment in which we live, and on every level. I mean, I woke up this morning and I'm wondering, is there 150,000 Russian men, like fucking idiots, killing another 150,000 Ukrainians over fucking nothing that they're over going to get out of it? And when will we ever learn? So I suppose it's the world we're living in, Stefan. It's the background. What is the world we're living in? It's post-COVID. Even getting guys back into sheds, all those things. The world has certainly become digital. Men's sheds have traditionally been known as areas where people, have wood. Where did they get the money from? Who leads them? What's the future? What's it like to be a man at this age? Should men's sheds be for just older men? Should be reaching out for men in their 30s? All that sort of stuff. So it's the landscape. Just what colour is the landscape for you, Stefan?
Yeah. I think the whole concept of men's shed being thrown to men was actually some sort of a trap we fell into at the very beginning in most men's sheds. But for our partner in Armagh, we were funded by the big lottery and we had an age limit of 55 plus. So the people in Armagh just thought, well, that's for everybody. I'm too young for that shed. So it just sort of rolled on from there. But a lot of sheds in the same boat. People have this idea in their head that it's men's sheds for older men. But we definitely have to change that because we need a bit of energy in sheds now. Younger energy, like.
So yeah, I mean, just to say, when the shed opened up in Dundalk on the east coast of Ireland, I started for the very same reason, and probably the same genesis, Stephen or Stefan. It was for men in Dundalk who was over 55s, and I was only in my late 40s at the time, so I knew a lot of the guys in it, but I didn't go there. I came to Donegal here, and there was fellas in their 30s in it, so I think I was very fortunate in that regard, Sorry, just go ahead there. I'm just trying to let somebody in, I think. Okay.
You're on mute, John.
Sorry, I always find it difficult to kind of come up with, because there isn't a model of what a men's shed is there? There isn't something that says, take this off the shelf and this will work. And I think that's the joys of men's sheds, but it's also the difficulty of men's sheds. When I previous existence, I worked in social care and visited many a day centre. And most day centres are the same. They use an off-the-shelf model. They go, this is what we need, this is what we do, this is how we do it. And we need this number of staff, and we need this, and so on and so forth. But every men's shed is so utterly different from the next one. And we say we are unique in our shed, and we like to think that we're unique, but we're no more unique than anywhere else in the world, because it's made up of the people that's in the shed and made up of the activities and how it works and everything else. So I think it's always difficult to find the only common denominator, I think, is that opportunity and space where people can sit down and talk. I think that's the common, for me, that's the common theme of men's sheds. When I've visited other sheds, the biggest thing you do is sit down and have a cup of tea and chat, don't you? That's, to me, that is the only common factor. I'm trying to find other ones that are a bit difficult, really,
Yeah, just to say that early, maybe in March or February last year, John, you coined a phrase which has lasted with me when you said, I see for you that men's shed is where men sit, meet, drink tea and dream. And I thought that was a magnificent encapsulation of just what you need to encapsulate. The rest of it is open territory, how you do it in your own way. But I suppose the question I want people to maybe think about is, what is the impact of the changed world that we live in now, pre and post-COVID, both in terms of the way in which we operate, communicate. For example, the number of men in our sheds recently, anybody over 70 in Ireland, if you're over 70, you require a doctor's certificate to renew your driving licence. We have a man of 78 who's diabetic and he's having problems, and him being put off the road is essentially the end of his life. It's a frightening reality. And when I ask guys to come into a room and look up on the big screen, so at least we'd research the rules on the internet, fellas who showed no interest before were mad keen to turn up because it mattered to them. So one about, what's it like, you can't do your business online, or unless you do it online. You can't visit, you can get, like Austin will tell us about maybe his need to go to Galway, which is a long journey away from here, for medical intervention. Why can't that be done online? Why can't he do it? All those sort of things. So it's about what is it about the world we live in? How should we respond to it? And then to move on to the idea of, what about sheds, irrespective of what they are, what do they need in terms of leadership, what leadership would look like? Should we just allow it be? Can we help each other learn from each other? That's really where that conversation is. So thanks, Austin. Austin, I've been trying to get in, but he's finally in there now. So just come off mic, anybody would like to, come ahead to Graham, yeah?
Right, okay. Thanks for organising this, Liam. Number of things to pick up on, but first of all, I'm actually one of the ambassadors for UK IMSA. And when I saw this advertised, I thought, this could be useful to see what other people's take on it is. I've been shedding since 2015, and I know a whole lot more about it, but I just know that there's a whole lot more to learn. My take is, having got to this age that most of our shedders are at, that we've calmed down a lot. We've got the fire's gone out and it's down to roasting chestnuts. It's quite nice now, and we just have to live in the world that we're in and manage the bits that we can manage. Forget about the stuff that we can't affect. And I heard you say about, Ukraine and Russia. Absolutely agree there. What on earth is all that about? Well, maybe, the ego of one man, the ego of 10 other men, so much going on there. You can't even get to the bottom of it, whether it's about gas or whatever. I don't think we can affect those things. What we have to do is just quietly concentrate on growing our movement, because it's absolutely evident to me that this is a cause and a force for good, and it's good for the people involved in it, and it's good for the people that we bring in. I've just seen so many terrific turnarounds and people improving their life just for coming into a shed. And our job, as I take it, understand it, as an ambassador for the sheds, I'll explain a bit more, is actually just to give confidence to other sheds and sheds that want to start up. So my job, if you like, is if somebody phones up and said, I want to start a shed, I'll say, it ain't impossible. It's always going to be, awkward, and there's going to be ups and downs, but lots of people have done it before you. So in UK, what are we? I don't know. They can never pin down the number, but it's somewhere between 600 and 700 odd sheds. So lots of people have done this before. And picking up what John Rushford said, has he disappeared? Oh no, he's there. Right. John said, but we are all the same, but all different. It's quite, I've never been involved in Rotary, but I would imagine to a greater degree that they are they're more similar than we are. And everyone in every shed, you've got the awkward squad, you've got those guys who will always make a cup of tea for anybody. It's pretty unique, and it's just a really good thing. I mean, I used to run my own business, and I used to be all over the place all of the time. Doing this has been fantastic for me. Absolutely. So my world has shrunk down, to just doing this one thing and doing it well. It's terrific. On the energy side of things, you're talking about the 45-year-olds and stuff like that. I absolutely agree. If we can show those guys, they're going to come, to us. They're going to get to this age. So let's make our age a better place to be. We're all, aren't we, a bit like toddlers. We can go like the clappers for 2 hours, and then we've got to sit down, have a kip or cup of tea or something like that. But I think, if we can flag up that our end of life is something that to a greater degree has been pretty much ignored for generations, literally just generations. And of course, that's why they originally set the old age pension at 65, because they reckon we're going to live another 3 years and pop our clogs. Well, we've improved a bit since then, so we've got a better life to look forward to. So if we can educate those younger people to actually consider this older age that we're in, and it's not a crap place to be, is it? It's a pretty good place. I know an awful lot of people, who are very happy in their retirement, and it's not always money. It's this camaraderie, the buzz that you get from sheds. It really, really helps. So, I think if we can, I don't know, get those younger people in, educate, some of the people who are around the periphery of us, as to what we're about and the good that's done, then, that's the best that we can do for ourselves. But, I don't think we want to do anything dramatic. I think it's going to have to be, small steps.
Okay, thanks, Graham. I'm just wondering, Austin, maybe you would come on and just talk from your space. So the reason, a lot of my drive around this is, I was chairman of our shed until last March, and Austin has taken over, let's say, as a new generation. And a number of events have occurred since then, plus trying to cope through COVID, secondly, trying to find a resource to finance the shed, and then just interpersonal struggles within sheds of where people want to go. And then Austin has suddenly landed with this. So I just and I said to Austin before coming in here, as one of the people who I think would be a target of that valuable learning process, what do you see, Austin, as the issues for you as the leader of a shed with just under a year's experience? Could you just speak to that maybe, Austin?
Well, at the moment, I find it quite difficult at times, getting stuff sorted out, and we got a few things going this last number of months, but at times it is very hard to get everybody on board to go the one direction. I feel that's very hard and stuff. We did have training on committee stuff, which we're halfway there, but there could be a lot more help in it.
Well, for example, Austin, would you have any previous experience in running a meeting, in in looking for funding, in negotiating with authorities groups, in managing conflict?
None whatsoever. No. I would be in committees, but I wouldn't be on the board sort of thing.
So, just to say to you guys, for me, but I've watched this process and tried to support it as much as I could. And when I retired, say, from the role a year ago, the plan was that I would just get on with my life and I would do things that I'd like to do and enjoy them. I just want to let Tom Cullen in here. And, it turned out that's not that easy. And the reason is, so there is for me a personal responsibility in succession management of enabling, passing stuff on rather than assuming just happens by osmosis. So, I was trying to define here the paradigm. I think Graham has really well said, you come to a life where things slow down, your world in one level gets smaller, but at other levels it gets bigger because you start asking the what else possibility and you don't give a fuck. So you can just go out and enjoy yourself. So that's one aspect. And where does this post-COVID world leave us? But the second thing is, to throw it, do sheds need leadership? When the guys in England, not because they were in England, but somebody said you can just have a chairman for a meeting. Will sheds survive? The other thing is how, if you look at Austin, you wouldn't believe it, but he's only 50 this year. Or maybe he is 50. He had long hair until a week ago or 2 weeks ago. He hadn't cut it for 18 years. He looked like he was a great man for a Western movie. But my point is, I've said to Austin, he's come a long way in a year. Imagine how skilled he will be by the time he's 55. All the stuff that he'll learn. And then I said, it's not about you and me, Austin. It's about the chairman after the next chairman after you. That's who it's about. It's not about us. The person who doesn't know that I was ever the chairman. It's about the world it's about the seat that he inhabits, the skill sets that are there when he sits into that chair, the scaffolding and support that he's had in advance. So it's really about having that sort of dialogue. So again, so let's try and speak to that topic and freely just move it around. Again, if you want to just talk, put up your hand first and come off mic and do. But it's important that we engage in this dialogue. Now, I know I haven't gone around to ask everybody to say hello, etc. Because I was at a meeting this morning with 35 people from the Community Foundation of Ireland thing, and it took the whole meeting just to go around the meeting. So let's get our ideas out there. And I don't want to point it in. I mean, it's a free space, so please, the topic is leadership. What's it about? Can you learn it? Do we need to pass it on? What can we do? Stefan.
What I found from my experience that the sheds definitely do need some sort of leadership, some sort of a driver behind it. Like I found that our shed in late 2012 in Armagh, following a visit to the Dockman shed, which was just starting itself around that time. But I became I was on a volunteer post for 2 years, and then I got a job as a coordinator through lottery funding. But the shed needs some sort of leadership all the time. Somebody to drive it, somebody to maybe sort of, you would call it a figurehead, for want of a better word, but it needs somebody to just plant the ideas in their heads as well. Some of them, because most of the men just want to come to the shed for a bit of crack and just have somewhere to go to relax and get out of the house. But it's easy enough to plant a wee seed in their head and just empower them a wee bit, but it needs somebody to do that. It needs somebody in the front to do that,
So can I just ask you, Stefan, to clarify? I think you said that after a couple of years working voluntarily, some funding was received to pay you to do this type of work. Am I
I got a full-time post there for 6 years.
Yeah, so that's
now it's up again.
Yeah, but
the funding just finished there early last year. And we got a new pot of funding for running costs, which only allows for 12 hours admin. But that still leaves me, I'll still do the 12 hours admin to be able to drive the shed forward, because I would like to leave some sort of legacy behind me. I would feel if I didn't, I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but the shed would feel if I wasn't there, because I've took a back step for the last 8 months and I've watched them falling apart and bickering and arguing, and nobody willing to push themselves forward to do stuff. They're probably spoiled for too long, Liam,
But also, I think very important what Stefan alluded to there. If you have a group of men, say, who just met in an old trailer and had good time, it was probably the happiest time. The happiest time I've ever had in a shed was when I went there originally, and there was a big half a tree, a bottom of a tree, and I drilled a hole and put the head of an axe into the top of it, and I used to chop up pieces of wood by hitting a hammer. That's all I did. I went along on Monday and Thursday and just chopped, and that was the happiest time I've been. I didn't care if it was cold or warm, but as long as I had enough light, I just talked and we had to chat. But that's illusory. We did that as kids back in the old fields or something like that. We live in a world which requires health and safety. It requires resources and all the rest. And I think it's really important that Stefan talks. I mean, a fund of money just to keep the admin going, instead of relying on somebody who everybody thinks is, your man there, so he loves filling in forms. And the other thing is, you said, Confucius talked about a lack of clarity creating chaos. When what you mean is not what you say, and what you say is not what you mean, the whole world falls around in chaos. So it seems to me that structure is required. Whether you can have sort of an organic structure or whether you have a top-down structure, that's for people to discuss. But I think it's illusory to imagine that sheds will just continue just because they've been there. Maybe they will, but I just question that. Anybody else?
They won't
so maybe do you want to come in? Anybody else? I don't want to. I'm not going to. Dan, yeah, come ahead there, Dan. Yeah. So the rest was just
lovely to see some well-known faces. How you all doing? Very interesting. Look, it's loosely guided play, really. I think certainly everybody in my immediate circle and the work I've done with Nathan at Sheds on Frontier and everything, we very much recognise that leadership is an essential thing within a shed. But as somebody was just referring to there, where there's good crack, in the case of Ireland, for example, there's not normally a problem. And I say there's not normally a problem if there's good crack somewhere. You can just leave people to it. You don't interfere. They're just having fun. That's great. That's what it's all about. If they're being creative and respectful to one another, that's essential. Where people might need to jump in, so there might be one or two guys at the corner of the room who are not being involved in the crack. And if that's the case, that is when shed leaders come into their own, and they're either going down and having a quiet word just to befriend and be friendly to people who don't appear to be involved. Also, whilst maybe going over and have a little word with someone who's maybe having a little jibe at their expense, which is this kind of role. You know, if you're good at making things and doing things and servicing bandsaws as well, it all comes into the mix, and it's all very helpful. But in simple terms, at Sheds Sans Frontières, certainly we always refer to things in terms of shared community. So shared community knows no age, it knows no gender. And I think going into the future of the world that we are now currently living in, like it or not, and again, as Graham said, we can't do a lot about a lot of things going on in the world, but we can sure bloody well talk about them if we want to, over a cup of tea or coffee and a few biscuits. And putting the world to rights like that in a respectful manner and respecting people, that is what shared community is all about. So that's where I come at it. You're muted, Liam.
Thanks, Dan. So anybody else there? Again, the focus here is on just where sheds are, where the landscape for sheds, and the role of leadership going forward. So Tom Cullen there. Again, when you come in, maybe you might just say where you're from, so everybody will know where we're at. So Tom, just unmute there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm out of Thurles Men's Shed in County Tipperary. Basically, I've had a lot of experience. I come out of a public service, well, Defence Forces background, but and I'd had a lot of experience with leadership in that sense. But obviously, that kind of leadership wouldn't work in a men's shed because you know, if somebody doesn't do something, you couldn't ask him to do 20 press-ups and kind of that kind of carry on. But the mind all that. The point I'm making is what's happened now with sheds is what's happening in general with voluntary groups. We're now all legally bound to the charity regulator in one way or another. So we have to have an element of corporate governance. And a lot of people in the shed rely on an individual who we could call them a leader. The problem is once a shed relies on a person, it's doomed to failure. There's no doubt about it. It will fail because if there's no mentoring system and nobody coming in behind, the object, in my opinion, of the exercise of a leader in a shed is to make sure there's somebody coming in to replace them. At all times, they must assume that they're going to try and do themselves out of a job. Because if you don't have a continuation of governance, and I mean, I've seen it from where we've built our shed from nothing to now having a purpose-built shed. And everyone would know, I'd say, that the amount of administration involved, and, most fellas that come into the shed would say, I'm only in for a cup of tea, but the cup of tea needs a kettle, it needs a plug, it needs a wall, it needs a fuse board, it needs to pay electricity, the whole lot of infrastructural issues. And that falls down to one or two people in a shed to actually make that happen. So they kind of take on a leadership role, a de facto leadership role as a consequence. And the issue then is if it's when the shed is synonymous with, someone would say, Thurles, give Tom Cullen a ring. That's a problem. That to me, now we have a huge problem because, if it's synonymous to Tom Cullen, well, now we're, and that's where Thurles is at the moment. And I'm trying to stop that because if everybody is contacting me and I decide in the morning and said, yeah, look, no, I've no more of that I've actually, the shed closes. Now, that's not because Tom Cullen is something fantastic. It's just because a reliance has come on an individual. And I think there's, as you said earlier, Liam, it's important that we have a mentoring system and we have a system where there's people coming on all the time and that we're, the next person is making it better. You have to assume that somebody will add to the thing positively, that you leave it better than the way you got it, kind of a situation. But leadership is a huge problem, I know, in the sense that we're working with a development company now to try to create a kind of a county structure, because we have sheds, like I operate with 4 or 5 sheds, where there's nobody in the shed has any administrative background. So they're not able to make out an application form for whatever grant is available to them there. So they don't have the skill to actually drive that forward. So that's leadership in itself. And my point is, you know, we should be able to put all that together in a network and say, right, why can't we create an administrative cell in the county of people who come from a public service administrative background and say, look, yeah, we can deal with all that. And then another cell of people who have a skill set for something else, and not just look at it as a shed, because individual sheds will not, they'll all have skills. Like, we can solve all the problems because all the sheds between them will have all the skills and all the problems, the solutions to all the problems. But to harness all that is the issue. And that's where the leadership comes in. You know, I think the leadership can't be in a shed, because a lot of you know, there is leadership in sheds, but a lot of sheds don't have that, be it the age profile, be it the person who comes in who just wants to socialize. But if you don't have somebody who's going to just put their head up the parapet, you know, that person can't come in to socialize, because you're not going to get the grants, you're not going to get this, you're not going to get that. And nobody's going to want to say to somebody, listen, you have to hand in €25 a week here in order for us to pay our insurance, to pay our utility bills. So you're constantly sourcing money. I mean, I'm constantly begging. I mean, most places I go now, they just actually hide, because I'm constantly begging for something, because it's just the way it is. And the charity regulator in the state considers that, you know, you have a legal responsibility once you take on board a committee role. And so there's all that to be considered. And people are saying, I don't really want to take on that role, you know, and that's why we are saying to the development company and the ETBs, you know, when they talk about these buzzwords for governance, you know, and say, okay, that's all very fine, but let's work together on this. And we're saying here at the moment, we're working with the development company next month to have a network for the county and say, right, okay, what's the problems and how can we, for example, I've done 6 HSE National Lottery grant applications. No big deal. I was able to do them. I had a template for it. Wasn't actually all that big an ordeal, but people got between 3,000 and 8,000 euro in grants, which was fantastic. But that's not a solution. That's only Mickey Mouse stuff. That's only a once-off me doing something for them. That doesn't actually make their shed sustainable in the long run. Whereas I think there needs to be kind of a county, provincial, national type structure put in place to actually support and bring forward leaders. As someone in our shed said to me, I don't have any skill. No, he said, you have. He said, we just haven't taken it out of you yet. You know, we all have a skill, you know.
Okay, just again, just explain to you about time. So we'll run till 4 o'clock, and I had sort of a couple of sections divided into. So I just want to looking at the paradigm section here, just the background, the landscape, and I think that's really good. There's a couple of people who haven't contributed. And again, if you'd like to contribute, perhaps just come on air. I want to ask Jim Heffernan in a moment, because Jim is from outside this space, and I really value his insight. A lot of things I've in my life when I've talked to Jim, he's really created great balance and insight for me in relation to this. And I see your value here, Jim, as someone, like we've talked in the tea and chat sessions, is coming from an outsider to a space and looking at it. So Tony, maybe you want to come in there, yeah? Tony Liddington, yeah?
Been waiting for this, haven't you, Liam? How are you? Happy birthday for tomorrow.
Oh, good.
Hey, fancy sticking your head over the parapet and asking about leadership. Oh, what? I had to come. I'm actually in a real 2 and 8, because I don't know if you heard, Liam, but I've just moved from down in Hampshire over to Cheltenham area, closer to the daughter. How come she wanted to leave home and then demands that we go and live near her? Oh, that don't work out, but still, that's another thing. So at any rate, back to the question in hand, which I must say, I feel a lot of people have been skirting around it and been talking about everything except the real thing, i.e. leadership. I don't actually feel that we need leadership in men's sheds. I think that Liam knows it. I think that we've all reached an age where we've had enough leadership during our lives to choke us to death on. And that we're worldly wise enough, that we've got enough nonce about us, that we can all sit down with that famous cup of tea that everybody talks about, quite rightly, We can all sit down around a table with a cup of tea and sort out exactly what direction we want to go in and exactly how to go about doing that. And if we don't actually, those around the table know about how to go about doing something, we do know around the table who to go and ask to find out how to do that, because we've all been around long enough to do that. So I'm a great believer in that. Yeah, I believe that there should be a head of your group, for the simple reason it's like anywhere. If you like, let's go to the workplace. We all decide, if you like, mutterings amongst the shop floor and that, or the office, that we all want a pay rise. And if we all go there individually at the manager's door, hammer on it, and there's 20 or 30 of us out there saying all the same thing, but we want a pay rise, I mean, that's just mayhem. What you want is one person to represent us to go forward. And that's what I'd see as, I'm not talking about we're going to elect the shop steward or something, but what we do is that we put somebody forward to represent all of us and to serve all of us. And there's the big difference between leading and representing / serving the people. A leader will come up and say, this is what we should be doing, blah, blah, blah. This is how we're going to do it. Somebody who's representing the group per se, not maybe, you're going to get dissenters. You're going to have people that don't agree with how something ought to be done. And you're always going to get that in life. But as long as the majority is actually represented, then you can move forward always. And that person that might have to go and talk to other people, local councils, whatever, they're the representative. I do get, because of personal experience, I have met people that when they rock up somewhere, even a social event, one of the first things that comes out of their mouths is, I'm the chairman of the local men's shed. You know, and it's a fucking power trip to them. And it really, you know, you can laugh, Dan, but you know it's true. I'm watching him.
Sorry, just to cut across you, Tony, because I want to get everybody. But no, I think, look, Tony's alluded to a number of things. Firstly, in one way, we've really gone on to discussing the style of leadership, that because there are different leadership styles. But I think it's really important, and we consider that lots of, you know, I think.
Can I just make two more points?
Sorry, sure, Tony. Sorry.
And then I'll shut up. I've been very good so far, haven't I?
I'll get you to sing next. Go on.
That's me. I mean, people do. I've written down here a couple of edits. People do go off on an ego trip. We've all met these individuals. They get pissed with power, and that's just how it is. I personally, Charities got thrown up by one of the speakers today about a charity commission. Why? Yes, he's absolutely right. As soon as you tie up with a charity, as soon as you go and get registered, they turn around straight away. They say there's got to be a chairman, a secretary, and a treasurer. Those three people, all right, according to the Charity Commission, they are the shed. They say what goes, and whatever goes, nobody can argue with them. Well, they can argue, but it carries no weight whatsoever. As far as the Charities Commission goes, those three people are the shed. Everybody else is just a hanger-on. So I'm not happy with, why do you have to go to Charity Commission? You can raise money. There's plenty of sheds out there that aren't registered. You can raise money and achieve your aims without actually going down that hard thing. And I suppose the biggest thing that I feel is that it's not so much leadership that we want, it's communication. We need to be able to talk to one another. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the 12 guys sat around that table drinking a cup of tea. I'm talking about exactly what we're doing now. We need to be able to talk to one another. Somebody said that they had a particular skill in doing sort of paperwork or filling out forms and how to do that. That's the sort of thing that we can pick one another's brains from. I'm not good at that, so I can contact him and say, right, how do I go about that? I want to do this, this, and this. Can you help me in any way to sort of achieve that? And that's it. It's all about communicating and not being dictated to by somebody. Just to finish off, I'll say that I've now been in 2 sheds. I'm not in a shed at the moment. I'm thinking about starting one, but so I might need some of your help, Dan. But I've been in 2. One of them was very, very dictatorial. One of them was, still is as far as I know, led by somebody who's pissed with power. And it's just the nature. It doesn't make him a bad person, but it's just the person he is. The last shed that I went into, no chairman, no real structure at all. Everybody sat around a table. That's what I described earlier. They all sat around every Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock. Everybody meets up, those that want to go, sit down. Up by 10:30, they're all sat down having a cup of tea, and they just anything that comes through, like post or anything like that, or being approached, that comes up. Everybody decides whether they're going to do this or not do this, and all that. And it absolutely works a charm. Absolutely a charm. At one time somebody come up about, shall we have a chairman? Everybody backed away from it.
Okay,
I'm done.
No, thanks, Tony. So there's a couple of people who, is there anybody else would like to say anything on this, just at this entry stage? If there isn't, maybe Jim, would you just come on there, Jim? And again, I've said to you that I really value the fact that you're looking at this maybe in a third person position in relation to what we've been talking about. Any comments or thoughts?
Don't know about your expectations here, but anyway, I suppose the what I hear listening to people, they're the sort of things that any organization as it starts to form runs into those issues, and as soon as the organization starts to grow in any sense at all, it very quickly has to put some sort of systems and structures in place, whether it's just basic ground rules or whatever. And obviously then the requirement to raise money means that you're getting more and more into a legal situation, and the whole charity thing starts to rise. I suppose I would step back a bit further again and actually say, we're talking about leaders. I in my experience that over the years, what voluntary organizations, and I suppose in management situations, leadership is different than management. Management is about a group of skills that needs to be developed, and management operates within a structure. And generally there will be in any voluntary organization, there will be some sort of, one of the ones I would be familiar with would be the GAA, which would, every club is a mimic of every other club. There's a chairman, there's a secretary, and whatever. And in fairness to the GAA itself, it puts a lot of effort into club development and training people on admin and so on and so on. They do regular courses on that sort of stuff for them. So that's a whole area, depending on how big you want to get into. But the leadership, on the other hand, to me, is as much about passion, and quite often the leadership can come from somebody that's not in one of those official roles. There may well be the person who suggests ideas or sees what's happening within the group, and is able to encourage maybe some of the weaker guys and people in the club to come up or speak up when the organization has gone off the wall a little bit or losing the run of itself. So leadership is very hard to put your finger on what it is. I would feel passion is a very big part of it, and energy is a very big part of it. And of course, the danger with that is that that passion and energy can become authoritarian, and it can become a power trust. That's kind of rambling a little bit. One of the models I came across, there's loads of these models around, organization models around, and the rest of it. But one of the simplest ones that I came across way back in the 90s was, that called the customer triangle. And basically, there were three elements to that. There was strategy, where you want to be down the road. There's systems and processes, and then the third one is people. So if you imagine that triangle, and then if you imagine in the middle of that would be the customer, which I would be driving at, but in this sense, the members, so the member has to be core to all of that, or else there's no point to the shed in that sense. So all of those have to be balanced.
Sorry, Jim, just at the moment, there's a lot of feedback coming through your system, Jim, so maybe just leave you at the moment.
It's coming from Paul's, I think.
Maybe Paul isn't on mute, but yeah, so again, just to say, I'm different because I've stuff coming in through CAN, so there's no feedback coming from my end. But just again, it's important. So I tell you what, if everybody can just mute your mics for a moment, then we'll see if that goes. The sound. Just Jim, you mute yours just for a moment, will you? Just mute yours. I think the feedback will have been removed. So maybe if you just unmute again, Jim, and just finish your point then, would you? Thanks. Just trying, yeah.
Yeah, what I was saying, what I found helpful to me in the past, and when I got involved in any new situations, I'd always go back to this very basic model, and you can build around it as much as you like. But it was a concept called a customer triangle. I think it was developed by a guy who used to run SAS, the Swedish Airlines. But the focus was very much on customer and customer service. Now, for me, in your instance, the customer is the member, the club member, and you basically have to satisfy the club, the members' needs, whatever they are. But to do that, then you need a structure of some sort, whether that's formal, but somebody needs to manage the money. Somebody needs to be able to guide the meetings in some sort of way. And somebody needs to be able to deal with the correspondence. Now, sometimes that may be the same person, and often is one person doing all of that. But you need those elements for the organization to operate from day to day. And then there's the people element of it, which will come from, it may be, it is something we talk about in organizations will be about culture, and we were talking earlier there, Tom was talking about, coming from a defense culture, which has a particular way of doing things. But the culture will be driven by the people that exist. I'm not sure that you can actually manage it. I think it's something you can deal with it, or you can try to adjust it somewhat. But ultimately, it's the people. It's the people, and the systems and structures that you put in place have to match the people's abilities. The people, and match also what they're looking for from it. And that's a real challenge, And then the higher one, as I was saying, and remember, I keep saying at the center of all this has to be the shed member. The strategy then, as you grow, how are you going to develop? The succession stuff that you talked about, how are you going to finance it down the road? What challenges are happening externally to you around, health and safety requirements, as you mentioned, and so on? How are you going to deal with those down the road? So it becomes quite complex, and I think that's essentially what you've all been saying. I have found it useful to just use that triangle sort of thing in terms of structuring discussions, let's say.
Okay,
and then put bullet points around it.
Yeah. So Jim, I just also want to welcome Mark McCormick, who's come to join us again. Mark is from outside of this sort of the main shed space, but Mark has done a lot of work around developing resilience programs with a lot of people, including companies, etc., and is very much interested in the whole area of mentoring, etc. So, Mark, we've been really talking just there initially about, I suppose, trying to look at the landscape that we're in, say, in men's sheds going forward, given COVID and all the rest, and inevitably, and also that where does that lead into the question of, is leadership necessary in a shed? What does leadership consist of? our leaders made, how will they develop, etc. And there are differing views about this. It's all centered around a proposition that I have, which is I'm put there exploring people's views, and my vision is to try and pull together a learning group of people, and my proposition is that they would be in the 45 to 55 or 60-year-old age group, in order that over a period of 4 years, you would end up, even if it's only 6, that those 6 people in 4 years' time would be like people, Tom will surely attest to this, who the armed forces who've been through the struggles together, who understand big picture stuff, but that they would get the opportunity to meet intelligent minds. And I mean, Mark might give you some background into some leadership programs. He has been fortunate enough to have been selected by a very powerful group of people. So maybe you'll speak a little bit about your experience of getting into leadership, Mark, and what it might mean, would you?
Yeah, well, lads, first, sorry for not being here on time. I got the day wrong, Liam. The kids are in school, so I was off today. Schools are off, but secondary schools are off, but primary schools are in. So I was running and to and fro this morning. So thanks, lads. Sorry again for being late. I suppose, I set up a wee company called Create the Great in You. I suppose where it started, I met Liam back in 2014. I was doing a research project in DKIT. Hadn't really picked a research project at that point. I'd done a lot of projects. I ran a lot of, what way would you put it? Back then, I ran around a lot. You know what I mean? When I mean run around a lot, people might have seen me as a leader, but I would have seen me sort of more like a madman, to be honest with you. I was running 20 different projects. They were all good, but you end up burning yourself out. So that, for one thing I would say in leadership is and you know this yourselves, is I learned this one, not that I learned it, but self-leadership. That's the most important part. Never mind leading anybody else till you can lead yourself. That'd be one thing I'd be encouraging everybody to think about. Grounding ourselves and getting ourselves to start thinking about ourselves rather than everybody else. Because until we're coming to terms with who we are, what we do, and what we have to offer, then I believe we're not much good to anybody, because we're running around leading something that not everybody might be interested in, So it's about, I think, like having these series of conversations, but I'm probably ranting a wee bit there. I met Liam anyway back in 2014, and Liam was my first mentor. And it was very interesting because I didn't really understand the concept of leadership. I didn't understand the concept of really even who I was, because for me personally, my father was killed when I was a young fella, when I was 3.5. So I wouldn't have had that male role model in my life. So I think it's about role models, mentoring, leadership. I think they're all connected, but I do think the communication piece is very, very important. Liam opened my eyes to some of the stuff that I was doing around what I wanted to do, but what was holding me back. And from that, I put in a research project, and it was called Mentoring Males, a positive approach to improving young men's success in education and life. And what I looked at in that research project was the mentor being maybe the missing link, right, to that art, or that father, brother, auntie, uncle, because you can be many different things to many different people, especially young people. We can go in and out of roles for people. But I looked at one-parent families. I looked at the cost of the exchequer. I looked at the early school even being a problem, but I also looked at the suicide rate, which at the time was 4-1, and I think it's about 8-1 now. 7-1 or 8-1 at the minute, and I have a problem with that, because my kids today had to pay €5 to wear a fucking flyery tracksuit, a bright tracksuit, into school to give it to Pieta House, right? And I met a lady walking up to the school just there 2 minutes ago, and I said to her, I don't really agree with this. And she said, me either. She said, my daughter is off the walls with anxiety at 17, and they're telling these kids about suicide, because that's what they're doing. Right? If they want to raise money for something, raise away. That's the way I look at it. Stop telling the young people what you're raising for. Kids don't. There's an awareness of suicide out there now, as I see it, but it shouldn't be. Anyway, I'm going into different rants there. I do apologise, right? But
yeah, sorry, Mark. Just to make valid, maybe you could describe the experience that you've had on that leadership development program.
Oh yeah, okay.
How you got into it, what it is, and what you gained out of it, right?
Yeah, well, I've done 2 leadership programs, and both leadership programs were as good as the next one. The Timony Leadership Institute is a very high-end program. I think it's about €19,000 now to sit it for 6 months is what the program lays out for. Now, that program was, yeah, it was interesting. I suppose for me, what I got out of it was I didn't really feel like I fitted into that program, right? And I think when we come into groups, I don't know what anyone else is like, but sometimes that's what we feel like, whether we fit in or fit up. So which is the right group for you, or which is the right leadership program, or what are we trying to lead? This program was for high-end management, Liam, right? So for probably guys, most of them would have been on a salary of maybe 200K plus, CEO level and right the way up. I got a personal coach out of that, right? So this assigned me up with a personal coach, and he was able to talk to me around management. But the management piece was about managing myself. It probably took me 6 months after that to really realize what was happening, you know, that I was there to sell my wares to them, but they were there as a social gathering because it was more of a trip away for them, if that made sense. And the leadership program was a little bit on the side. So there was lots of learnings. What you did in that program, lads, you got a case study. Now, there was professors from IMSA, Harvard, and San Telmo in Spain. So we got like the like of Joe Pons, Rory McDonald, Christoph Zott, amazing lecturers, right? Talking to you about stuff, and they'd give you a case study, and then you'd go off in a group and you'd dissect the case study, and then you'd come back in. To me, I'm not saying I do a lot of stuff like that with groups in schools anyway. I've always been doing that, but this was new to a lot of these guys that had never worked with someone at the same level as themselves for a different company. The communication piece, that was the thing that brought them all together, where they were actually openly and honestly communicating. That was the Timony, right? So that was very high end. We went to Seville, we experienced the lifestyle over there, just the way people live, the way people do business. It's completely different. It's nearly unspoken. Business is done and you don't actually even have to shake the hand there and then. But it was about money, right? So a lot of money exchanged. Before we left coming home, they were already signed up for the next program or a part of the next program. So I'd say in one room alone, there was 150 grand done in a couple of minutes before we left. I then did the Lismullen leadership, which is John Killeen. Dr. John Killeen would be the chairman of the Timony, and the president of the Timony, and he's the chairman of the Marine Institute of Technology. He's a good guy. He sponsored me to do that program because he believed in the work that I'm engaged in. But his cousin is Paul Harmon, and Paul Harmon is over the Lismullen. Now, Lismullen looked more at ethical leadership. And just when I was hearing you saying what is leadership, I wrote down ethical and self. The ethical part of leadership, because there's different types of people and there's different types of personalities, as you all know. And the ethical piece was, well, why are they doing something? So there was different case studies presented. For one case study, for example, was a guy who went over to, I can't remember the full context, to Africa, say, and he set up this medical center. But why he set the medical center up, we had to work that out. But it was all down to his values and his beliefs, right, which came from wherever. So there was a lot of deep learning thinking in it. But we done one on the Timony, and it was about a guy who was going for the job of a CEO, right? And you had to break down the case study in your groups and in your teams. And obviously everybody had a different perspective. But the one thing that jumped out for me in that case study was it gave the background of him as a child and what he learned. Now, we had Brian Sheridan, he's the harbour master of Galway Harbour. So there were some pretty big guys in this thing. And it was what different people were seeing different things, if this makes sense what I'm saying. But the thing that jumped out for me was this guy had such a good work ethic, right? But on the way up, he'd lost all his team. He even lost his family to the extent that he was still with them. But the young kid, when the family, it described it that the kid was having difficulties in school, and they were putting it down to perhaps lots of different variations, right? Now, the one thing that jumped out for me in that case study was his work ethic. He got it from his dad when his dad was a coal merchant, and his dad paid for his college, told him he'd put him through college and put him through school. And when we dissected the whole case study and everything was pulled out, people were wondering why he didn't get the CEO job, why he'd lost everybody. But that's the piece that I took out of it, was that it was his morals and his values and his beliefs He worked so hard, he thought everybody believed the same thing as he did. And I think that's what happens. Our perception to somebody else's reality is two completely different things. And if that makes sense what I'm saying, that's the type of stuff. It's about everybody thinking as a whole group rather than it just coming from one person. And there's nobody really right, but it's a collective group trashing stuff out. So yeah. Liam, you're on mute.
Sorry, guys, again, just to try and make sure that we keep things in some sort of way on track. So just want to welcome Enda Egan for joining us. So Enda just emailed me last night to say there were other issues going on and he might only make the back end. So Enda, we've been talking here since 2:30, and we're going to be finished in 20 minutes. And essentially, I have posed the idea through four filters: the paradigm, the problem, the proposal, and the plan. And as explained earlier, Stefan, just raised the question, what's a paradigm? I mean, again, it's around language, but we talked about, like, what's the landscape we're all living in post-COVID? Let's say in terms of sheds, in terms of development, what's needed for the sustainability of sheds, and where the role of leadership fits within that. And initially, the proposal that I put out is to seek to find others who are interested in promoting a structured, whether formal, process whereby the wisdom and experience of those who've been further down the road can be passed on, in my view, to a group, because of their age, say between 45 and say 55, over the next 4 or 5 years could develop a phalanx and a camaraderie, and basically like a Knights at a Round Table set of wise, strong, resilient leaders. Now, in your email you sent to me last night, you had referred to your own interest in scoping out work with the university in Galway and in Maynooth, and perhaps even at a national framework level within the ETB structure. So there has obviously been parallel dialogues. So maybe if you, Enda, just come on and briefly share where your thinking is. Now, again, Enda is the CEO of the Irish Men's Shed Association, so has different briefs in relation to that. So anyway, welcome, Enda.
Thanks, Liam, and thanks for organising this, and sorry for being a bit late. I suppose in the first instance, just to comment on the general idea, one of the things that's very, I would say, obvious or in the last number of kind of months since sheds are starting to open up post-COVID, certainly from our point of view, is the number of sheds that are actually unlikely to reopen. And in an Irish context, that's kind of looking somewhere between 60 and 70. Now, there isn't an exact science behind that. It's based on making phone calls to each exact shed and talking to the leaders that are there in the sheds. And predominantly, I suppose, what appears to be, there are a number of issues, but one of the predominant issues is that, leaders in sheds, and we're probably predominantly here speaking about sheds that are young in terms of their evolution and their history. So their sheds tend to be kind of 2, 3, 4 kind of years old. And the leaders in those sheds, not due to COVID, but it would appear to be as a result of their health naturally deteriorating, for the want of a better term. And it leaves them in a position where they are no longer they feel able to participate in the shed environment, and they just don't have the energy or perhaps the appetite to do it. But what that is immediately thrown up, I suppose, is the whole issue of leadership within sheds, and particularly succession and the lack of kind of succession. So I think right now we're certainly seeing the results of not having a kind of a leadership program within the kind of the shed environment. Now, look, you can say that about a lot of organizations, I suspect, but look, the one we're dealing with is sheds. And I would say out of the majority of the sheds that we've been speaking to, there is no other leader stepping up. And there is no kind of succession planning within the shed. So it's something that has come up in the last number of months. We haven't, to be honest, Liam, we haven't had any sort of discussions at this point with any of the the universities or that. We have had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with a minister. It wasn't her particular brief, but we did mention it. And our plan was to kind of, seek support perhaps for the sheds and see if there was an appetite out there for it. So I think this is really coming at the right time, and it allows us maybe to explore it through this forum, and not quite sure where the whole idea will end up, but certainly very happy to see what comes out of this forum, and it may well be something that becomes more of a universal thing or international thing rather than a country by country thing. So I think there's a lot to be learned from a forum like this, and certainly delighted to be involved, and let's see where it takes us.
Okay, thanks. And I mean, I'm just mindful of, there was a quarter of an hour to go, and would it be extremely foolish for any of us to imagine that we could initiate a conversation which we really didn't know what was going to be about. We might end up with rebels like fucking Tony Lidden up there. Just because his daughter makes a move from one part of the country to the other, he has to upend the whole idea of mentions. But I think, what I'm saying is, I think throughout the conversation that has happened here, Dan, just again for both you and Mark and anybody come in late, this is recorded with the intention of giving forward. So what we want to do when this is finished, I want to circulate this on YouTube so that people can pick up in the conversation wherever it is. And if it stimulates people setting up other conversations, certainly that attract me, I'll certainly go to them. I mean, a big shout out to Nathan and Dan, who are running a once a month, again, they'll tell you at the end of the month, a forum for shed leaders to talk. So that's a really good initiative. My focused concern and interest is, I think from a personal level that I know a number of people whom I value, who I, over my years, I'm 66 tomorrow, I said, over the year I've met people from different areas of life, and they have massive abilities in terms of leadership. And even Jim's insight and pointing out leadership and management are two different things. They're often embodied in the same person, they may not necessarily. As Jim said, you could have an executive management group, but the soul of leadership might be like Jesus. Like Jesus never took any money for his gig. He just had all the other guys making money for him and selling product. Two different people do things in different ways. And Tony has alluded to the failure in some authoritarian roles where, becomes ego trips, etc. I want to sort of step back from that to say, well, what are all the possible, I think there's, even when Stefan mentioned from Armagh there, without him at some point be getting paid an admin for doing admin, there'd be nothing there. Without all of the individuals who do things in the sheds, even Tony or have the keys of the shed that you get into, or someone to supply the shed. Jim said in any organization, somebody has to make the tea, somebody has to keep the books. There's no such thing as, when I was a kid, we used to meet out in the fields and we had a gang. And there was a leader of the gang until somebody beat him up and then somebody would take over that leadership. But we just went to the fields. We were only lying under trees. There was no costs involved because we were kids. Our parents paid our costs. But when you get up, you have to pay your costs. So the thing what I look at is, I'm happy to work with, if 5 or 6 men, in my view, my suggestion that it would be in between 45 and late 50s, not because of ageism, but because I think that over a period of a number of years that they could develop a really resilient, trustworthy, challenge through peer support sort of ability to help each other to review things at a higher level. Now, I suggest that there are approaches like the formal management, professional management development processes, stuff like the Timothy Institute, as Mark said, 19 grand a session to go, and there are all those. And I think they're wonderful, don't get me wrong, but I'm in a post-education space where I've served my time in education, I've served my time in syllabi, and I'm personally interested in driving into a non-linear, chaotic management space. If you want to know my thinking, read up a guy called Tom Peters, his work around what he calls messy management. And I love the struggles I've had with John Rushford in the past, who tells me he's a social scientist. So he thinks him and me in engineering terms really don't agree. But John Rushford is the guy who best, for me, exemplified the ethos of a men's shed, is where men go to drink cups of tea and dream. I just thought it encapsulated everything. So what I'm wondering in terms of here, and trying to tidy up this conversation, to say, if looking at the effort of trying to create another stage of discussion around the idea of a group of people coming together to learn leadership skills. And that involves big questions like, what is leadership? Can you have, bottom-up leadership that works? Can you have, or what's the problem with authoritarian leaders? Can you have processes which prevent people ending up as egomaniacs and all of the rest? But that discussion taking place within the learning group of potential leaders, that itself becomes a learning skill of leadership. So that's what I just want a quick feedback around. I'm looking for people who are interested. The only people I want to work with in future are people who are curious and people who want to play. People who just want to knock and find holes. That's great. It's great. It's just not going to be me. So maybe if someone would like to speak to that. Paul, you've turned on your mic again, and that's what causes the feedback, I think. So if you just mute your mic again. So if I just mute, see, I've muted you, Paul. Whatever's happening, when you come off mic, Paul, your speaker is feeding back into the microphone. So perhaps if you turn the volume on your speaker down a little, but I'd certainly love if you want to come on and speak there. Will you? Perhaps you did want to speak. Do you? If you do, just put your hand up and do that. So I'm not sure if you heard me, Paul. Again, you might have turned off your speaker now. But no, if you want to speak, Paul, just put up so we know you're going to come in. So yeah, okay, come on, unmute there, Paul, and come in, will you please? So I've just asked you to unmute, Paul. Yeah, good.
Hello.
So I've just asked you to unmute, Paul.
Is it better?
Yeah, you need to spin your speaker down a little bit. Yeah, yes, but I can hear you, but you need to spin your speaker down a little bit. You can hear me hearing you, hearing me hearing you.
Okay.
It's really unintelligible.
Any better now?
Okay, so again, we're at early stages here with technology, but what's happening is you're getting feedback. Your microphone is picking up your speaker. Obviously, if you had a pair of cans or something in, anything that will kill that. We'll come back to you. If you do that, Paul, please come on. So just quickly shooting around, I know we started with you, Stefan, maybe what you got out of this conversation. Is it something that you want to continue in being involved with? Have you any suggestion on how to develop that aspect? So the theme here is the developing of skill sets of leadership, which would then support sheds going forward. So Graham, if you'd like to come on there, Graham has a hand up. Unmute. So yeah, excellent.
First off, as I said, I think it's a really good initiative, and this handing on the baton is a very, very worthwhile thing. I've been involved in a number of sheds, and without realizing it, you start off, when you start a shed, you're doing all the jobs, and actually you're spending most of your time then giving all of those jobs, whatever that might be, the treasurer, the secretary, the tea maker, the health and safety guy, giving all those jobs to somebody else. So it's just that's a gentle bit of management, but I think the whole idea of this relay race, of handing on the baton, I think is a really worthwhile thing to follow up. From all of the comments that have been going on, I really feel that we either manage ourselves as sheds, or we get managed. Now, the only way to be comfortable and do what we want to do is to manage it ourselves. If we start to subcontract that management amongst, I don't know, various councils or whatever, I think you were talking about development companies, which I take are, organizations that will do the management for you. You're going to be told what to do, and you're going to be told how to do it and all of that sort of stuff. And you're going to lose that thing that is ours in each of our sheds. So I think we need to be very, very careful about, letting somebody organize us. Finally, the last thing is the succession planning and the sustainability is really, really important within our sheds. You've got to be not just wanting to hand on another job, but as you said, the chairman after the chairman before the next one, sort of 3 or 4 down the line. We've got to be looking at that. How we get there, I don't know. The problem is, and it's a fear, I suppose, from our point of view, is this just a phenomena for our demographic at the moment? And, you know, in 15, 20 years time, will guys really want to do sheds? I don't know. I mean, I've got a bunch of dinky toys on a shelf here. I think they're fantastic. and so do my grandkids. You know, they think they're great. My son, you know, sort of, you know, 40 odd years old, not quite so sure. But, you know, so I don't know. I think we have to look at all the kind of options. But if we don't manage ourselves, then I think we're giving away the crown jewels. This is what makes sheds.
Okay, thanks, Graham. So I'm mindful it's 15:55. I'm going to wrap up in 5 minutes. So a couple of things, just housekeeping. There is a chat operating in the background here. What I would ask is if you would like to be on a sort of mailing list for continue this conversation, what I'm going to ask you is put your email into the chat. If you've put your email into the chat, then what I will be saving the chat as a text file. I will then send that chat to everybody in this group. And when I get the video processed, then I will also send that video on. I've tried to record the video onto my local device, so I need to see how that works out. And this is obviously, there's no coercion or desire by me to do anything in relation to anything other than promote an idea about discussion. Listen to today, what I take from this is I would like to have a follow-up meeting, which may involve some people who want to come back and other people who haven't been here, because I'll continue to talk to people in between. And the theme of that, I think, would be, what does leadership consist of? What is leadership? What styles of leadership are there? What are the implications? And I'd like people to come back to think of that phenomenal, the difference between leadership and management. Are leaders born or can they be made? What is the role of mentorship? What are the dangers of egomaniacal leaders? What does servant leadership look like? And again, in Ireland, we have an organisation called the St. Vincent de Paul, which is a charitable organisation. But Vincent de Paul, the original individual, is often used in management development programs as an example of servant leadership. And certainly when you get to an age of retirement, if you're trying to make money out of being involved in sheds, you shouldn't have retired. So if there's any area that servant leadership is most suitable for, I think it's men's sheds. And the idea of this concept of giving forward. And the other thing that this idea of failing forward. Let's try lots of things that fail, but from which we learn the next step. So maybe just as a final, just go around, and I'm sorry, Paul, that every time you come in, your feedback affected you. I hope that perhaps we'll let you in at the end if you don't make too much noise. But I do want to feel you included, etc. But if we run around, and I just ask people to say, a simple sense or two, what did you get out of today? Do you think there's an interest for you in going forward? And you don't have to commit to that. If your name is if your details in the chat, I'll loop you in. That's it. I do think a lot of people here, just looking around the table, there's a lot of acquired knowledge, experience, and wisdom from everybody in this group. I mean, there's 1, 2, there's 10, 13 people on stage here. If you just took all that knowledge and gave it to Austin, and I put that, I'm not picking on Austin, I'm just saying I'm working alongside Austin. I think Austin would really value and maybe you can, when you get your turn, Austin, you make comment. I think you would really value access to that insight. So maybe if I go around on the screen as I see them, I'll just ask you to say a quick goodbye, hello, and, just to say, how this was for you. John Rushford from Nairn. John, if you come on, Mike.
Hi, goodbye and hello, as I say, or goodbye, hello and goodbye, whichever way around you want to speak it. I think it's confirmed to me that there is no one model. And I think that's something that sheds have got to work out for themselves.
Okay, John, sorry, I know you probably muted yourself. So maybe go on to just Graham, just to say, I'll go around the screen as I have them here, okay? Graham, yep.
Yep, fine. No, I think I've said enough. I'd like to be, included in any further conversations.
Excellent. And again, thank you, as I would for everybody, for your thoughtful contributions. Okay, Tony, I know as you're settling into this new neighbourhood over in Cheltenham or whatever, and you threaten to set up another men's shed, it'll be interesting.
It will be. Good times ahead, hopefully. Nothing really to add. I absolutely agree with John. I mean, there's all sorts of facets that you have to take in. But as long as the shed's open to those facets and those influences, it should be a happy shed.
Excellent.
It's when you shut people up, like you're always trying to shut me up. Anyway, on that note, bye.
All right, Tony. So Stefan from Armagh, yeah?
It just got, you can see now that every shed has the same problem as yourself, as their own shed. You know, they're struggling with COVID has done a lot of harm to sheds. It's sort of exacerbated everything quicker than most of. You go into a shed, you know there's going to be illness and death and sickness, but COVID has just blew that out of the water altogether. But it's left sheds, with regulators, it's left sheds scared of where they're going in the future. So this forum would be great for us and maybe bring something out of it and follow on the Irish Men's Shed Association, maybe show them a new way of doing leadership or something like that, you know. I'm looking forward to getting involved in this conversation.
Excellent.
As Andy knows, I've been in the sheds a long time. I've been on the board of the Irish Men's Sheds from the start. We were sort of the pioneers of it all. And you can see the struggles coming out now more so than ever. You know, it was always going to happen, but it's come quicker because of COVID.
Okay, Stefan, that's good. Nathan, I know we didn't get you on earlier. Would you like say again hello and goodbye, and also maybe tell us about the process that yourself and Dan are leading as well, yeah?
Yeah, thanks, Liam. Like Dan said, if anyone wants to get in touch, find out what we're doing, he's put his email in there. So it's shedison@gmail.com. Last month we launched the International Men's Sheds Leaders Forum. So it's really, you know, piloting this in a way. So this has been good because it's food for thought and lots of ideas and input. We've got the second session coming up on Tuesday, the 1st of March. It'll be evening time. We normally do it about 7 o'clock. I think we're going to go for 10 o'clock, Dan? Jesus, man, we'll be there till midnight. But just to encompass all of the international crew as well. So it was really good last time. But like you say, there's not one size fits all. There's so many areas to cover. But I think this is good because really there's a lot of people that want to drill down into exactly what it is. And so we're looking at it at international level in a really good, positive way, based on the experience of all the sort of shed leaders from around the world who, you know, are pioneering their own areas or have already done it. And so putting that together to say, you know, what is it that we really need? I think we all know what we need, and the ask is massive. And really, I think you need about 3 or 4 lifetimes to sort out all the issues with sheds and what it involves. And we're just here, we can do our bit in the now. It's an ever-changing world. The digital never changes or never takes the place of the human interaction. Okay. Will things change in the future? Maybe they will. But it's down to us to stand our ground with it, I believe, or else it will be changed for us as the world just moves on. But whilst there is many men taking their own lives still, and it's increasing, then there will always be a need for sheds and positive male interaction. And that's why.
Sorry, Nathan. Yeah, sorry, just I'm just trying to move along. Dan, a quick hello and goodbye there again. Just unmute you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry, I'm done. Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks, Nathan. I was just going to say, traditionally it takes a special kind of person to start a shed, but that doesn't need to be the case. If organisations and local structures, lovely to have Enda here representing IMSA, I'm sure that'd be very valuable feedback. It's essential that some of the difficult areas of work associated with committee structure, which has nothing to do with shed. It's simply a committee is all about facilitating shed. Shed leaders, you could call them anything. You think of shed leaders in terms of scout leaders. It's just it's the friendly person in the room. You can give people different names. But when we talk in terms of leadership, there's leadership of a movement, there's leadership regionally, and there's support within the shed. And I think we go forward with those kind of things in mind in a respectful environment and try and be as open as possible. And that's why we talk in terms of shed community. then we all go on. And you know where I am, Liam. We've kept in contact throughout. I'm sure we will.
Excellent. So
yeah.
again, what I'll make sure is that if whoever's on that mailing list, whatever detail that Dan and Nathan, I'll just circulate that. So Austin, thanks Dan. Austin, just go over to you a quick, again, I'm trying to get through a quick hello and goodbye really. Austin, just unmute there for a moment. Yep.
Yep. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was great. That's fantastic. I mean, a lot of experience there and a lot of interesting things there. So yeah, it's fantastic. Like,
I mean,
I hope to be here along the way.
Yeah, so my invitation really to Austin on this journey is, I mean, I see Austin as a relatively young and new leader in our shed, and in my support for him, I think that any work that I can do, if I can get another number of men in Austin's situation and bring them all together, I think they'll far outgrow anything that I could ever offer. That's what I think is important. So thanks, Austin. Maybe over to Jim.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Just unmute there, Jim Heffernan, yeah.
Yeah, found the discussion very, very interesting. As you know, I'm not involved in any sheds as such, but I'm sort of fascinated by the development of it, and you know, particularly the work that you've done there in Donegal, and particularly during the COVID, your efforts at you know, a growing Zoom use, let's say. The thing I find with all of these things, you know, Mark talked a lot there about, you know, very significant leadership programs he's involved in. And the challenge I've always found with those, I went on a lot of those in one form or the other over the years. The difficulty is, how do you take it away and make it practical? You know, how do you keep it practical and tangible to what you're trying to do? Now, some of that theory stuff is important and helpful, but translating it into actual implementable actions is where the real challenge, I think, comes. I think it's helpful to think, and I think it's important to distinguish between management and leadership, because in a lot of cases, I think what I hear you describing are a lack of management skills as much as any leadership skills. I don't think the sheds would be there at all if there wasn't leadership skills, what I call natural, passionate leadership, you know, people with energy who will go after things. But they may be struggling with the management skills, which are a slightly different thing.
Okay, thanks, Jim. And say, just Nathan just dropped out there, just said he has to go and pick up supplies. So I'm literally wrapping up. So maybe Tom, a quick wrap up from you, Tom Collins, just come off mic, or come on mic, sorry, just on.
Yeah, I'm a GA man as well, I have to say, Jim. But I come from the that kind of concept as well of, you know, club, county, provincial, central council kind of thinking, you know, and the big issue, like we have, for instance, we have an age profile of 78, 79 plus, which is a huge problem, because I don't think we're capturing the mental health of a huge amount of people out there that need support. We're working hard to see what can be done with that, but I know ENDA is working very hard on it as well. And I do feel that, you know, it's great to see people from other jurisdictions here. Like, as Graham said there, you know, that you don't want the, you know, development companies taking over. Like, we have 1,400 groups in Tipperary. As the development company said to me, Tommy said, you know, there's only 8 sheds. He said, I have 1,400 groups to look after. Even if I wanted to, he said, I can't take you over. You know, they want to help. There's a kind of a different mindset to it in, I think, the Irish state will say they don't want to actually get involved per se. They just want to support. And it's just the governance model in a shed. It's difficult to run because of the fact that sheds really are, as I call them, the door openers. There are 1 or 2 people who are keeping each shed kind of going. And, you know, that's not going to stay working. You know, if you have a leader, he needs to have somebody coming in behind him in case he gets shot, you know.
Okay, Tom, excellent. So I'm just going to go to Enda and then Mark, and then we'll finish off with Paul. So I hope your mic's going to work at that stage, Paul. So maybe Enda, again, just a quick, and I'm not trying to, like, just to say to you from myself, I mean, I feel I failed that we've run 9 minutes over time. And if I'm going to be in any way useful or competent going forward, I need to find a better management skill is to manage time in a meeting. So that when I tell people they'll be at an event for an hour and a half or 100 minutes or whatever, that's what it's going to be. So we'll just think this like the Man United game last week that ran into 100, or the Spurs game, it ran to 100 minutes. So Enda, you're in your 109th minute. Okay, go ahead, Enda.
Well, if running 9 minutes over, Liam, is a sign of failure, well, I'm well shot anyway, for sure. Yeah, I think, look, it's been well summed up by a number of people. I think, you know, it's something that we need to do. I think it's something that we certainly need to have a go at this anyway and see where it takes us. Tom is right, like there's only 2 or 3 people with the keys that's opening up the shed. Somebody else made a point there, you know, if you, you know, look at this 10 years down the road, and even 20 years down the road, who are the people that's going to be in the sheds? And so I think we have a kind of a duty of care to try and tackle this issue, to be honest. And I think, to be honest, the future of some of the sheds, looking at what's happening with COVID, certainly, you know, what we're doing here is a piece of work that will probably have real sort of implication. I think it was Jim or somebody made the point, which is absolutely true. These things have to be practical at the end of the day, and it has to be applicable to people. You know, when people go in the kind of leadership programs or whatever the case might be, whatever the outcome of this is, it has to be applicable to them, or otherwise they'll go once or twice and then they'll walk out again, you know. So there's a lot of work involved in the design of it. You know, one of the things that certainly strikes me when you come on these kind of forums and you listen to people talking, it really shows you how little you know. When I'm talking about myself here, you know, there's a lot of knowledge around the table, and I think we just need to find a way of trying to channel that to get a result, you know. So
Excellent.
Happy to be involved.
Yeah, excellent. And just to say in relation that, like, even as we're talking, one of the things I'm thinking that to bring in inspirational leaders to an event like this, and even ask them to give a 20-minute just a chat. I mean, there was a guy called Professor, now I know his name is Professor, I'm forgetting his second name, and he was from the University of Galway, but he's in his late 70s. He used to be the Vice Chancellor there, but he spoke at an Educational Training Board seminar before Christmas, and he gave an incredible thought-provoking conversation about community and voluntary work. And I've been trying to reach out to grab him to say, would you come and just speak to other groups like that? So even a topic like that, I'm thinking that might be an interesting thing to get somebody in for 15 minutes, give us a taste of what it's like to be in the presence of leaders, not specifics, but just a taste. So Mark, over to you. Mark McCormick, just unmute there.
Yeah, well, I went into a little bit of a rant earlier. I apologize. I suppose loads of things were jumping out at me. Like the thing of ethics, I just wrote it down, our working styles. I think what happens with a lot of people, myself included, is if we don't know our working style, because a lot of what our background comes from, whether it's the GEA or wherever it is, you know, at whatever type of level, it's community, right? For me, it's about community, about building a winning culture. And I think that could be an interesting one. How do you build a winning culture? What is the men's sheds? Like, we're going right back and stripping it back to the purpose, the vision, because the purpose and the meaning. I read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for the Meaning of Life. And when all else was falling for him, he had something to hold on to. And I just thought it was amazing. So I think, like, there's a need, right? I'm a social care practitioner. I'm a professional coach, and I work with people and groups around their needs. What is your needs? But there is a need, right? And as you said, the men's shed, they're all going to be individual sheds. But if there's something that bonds each men's shed together, like I did a research project with Charities called Mentoring Males, a positive approach to improving young men's success in education and life. But in my proposals at the end of the research project, you've probably seen it, Liam, I wanted to connect the dots with young people and the older generation, because I think the wisdom in the room here today, yous are far wiser than I am, and I have a lot to learn from yous. But I also have a little bit that I can pass on. And I think if everybody passes that little thing that they have, then it gets bigger and it mushrooms, you know. So that'll be my thing. I think 45 and up's great, but I also think of a young man I'm working with at the minute now. He's from Nigeria. He has no family. I took him here on Christmas Day and we had dinner and we kept him over that night. a chap like Joseph that's doing network systems in DQIT that has a skill set, right, but has no real purpose and no real belonging, I think he'd excel in a group like this of men, because he never had that. Do you know what I mean? And that's what I think. You wouldn't bring 10 or 15 young lads in, but you'd bring a select few like we did Liam back in DQIT some years ago, and you'd help them, and that's where you'd mentor them and you'd encourage them, you know. So that'd be my thoughts.
And just to say, Mark, I think that's a really thing. I wasn't really, when I set out a group, I wasn't being totally prescriptive. Yeah, I think somebody said to me the other day, what else? What else can I not see? What am I not thinking about? So just, Andy, you asked, was it Liam Curtin? I just know. It's Professor Garro Tuig from NUIG. So he must, I'm looking at him, he must be in his late 70s. Again, if you do know, maybe we can have a chat about that. So we've just come to the end. So Paul, would you just please come on again? And I hope that, Paul Darley, so let's hope that we don't have a feedback issue. But I'm delighted you came along. Yep. I feel unfortunate that your technology prevented you. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, so go ahead and tell us your biggest secret, Paul.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. So just your experience.
I guess better late than never. First of all, just to say it's really encouraging. It's great to see people thinking at a bigger, higher level about the whole thing to support the sustainability of all the sheds. For me, it's new. I haven't actually been in this this context before, so I'm more observing how it all works at the moment. And I have, I guess, experience from outside of this environment that hopefully could be of some benefit.
Okay, so again, just Paul, what I would ask you, can I just ask you, Paul? I mean, the technology, the communication link is really poor. But can I ask you if you would make sure you stick your email in there so that we don't lose it. So I'm literally going to close it up. Just explain what I'm going to. I'm just literally saving.
I have done, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to save the chat here, guys. That's what I'm doing. I'm just going to mute Paul. I've saved the chat. I just want to go around and say thanks everybody who turned up. No matter when you set up something, you don't know who'll come or who won't come. I think whoever's in at the start of a program, other people come on board or otherwise. I certainly feel that my contribution to what's the meaningless of being in the planet in the first place, I still feel I have a valuable contribution to make around something that I think is core. Just to say to you that also, back in a managing change master's program I did in Sheffield University, back in 1999, I met some amazing people, and most of these other people, as Mark experienced at the top level of English society, the guy beside me was second in command of a company who owned 28,000 houses. So it just gives you, compared to me paying my own money just because I was curious. But every single one of these people spent time on boards, trustee boards of massive charity trusts in England, and they all agreed that the most vicious experience they'd had in the world was when amateur, passionate, pioneering volunteers met at an interface that was necessary for transition with detached professionals taking over running it. And it's not unusual, it's a fractal of every organization. So in terms of those, they're kind of irrelevant because they're necessary, but it's what happens on the other side of that. What Enda talked about, in 20 years' time, what is necessary now to equip the leaders of sheds in the future for whatever they might want to be. If I'm alive, great. If I'm not, I just don't want to feel that I brought it into the grave with me, but at least passed it on. And it just, again, I'd like to, me personally, thank Austin for his role in development over the last year shed. He's really brought our shed out of COVID with a different style of leadership than I have. He's a nice guy. I'm a bit of a bollocks. So look at guys, I thank everybody. I'm delighted for this opportunity to start this conversation, and hope I will do what I said, save the chat, send it on to anybody who's involved. So maybe we just all chill out and say goodbye to everybody, and we'll hopefully meet whoever's interested soon. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, lads.
Okay, so
Thanks,
I'll end up now.
Thanks,
Okay.
Liam.